All right. Hello,
Hello,
everybody. Happy Monday.
hello, Amy.
Hi, James.
Hello, Amy. Hello, America. How are you?
How's it going in England?
Yeah, it's going very well despite losing the World Cup final yesterday. It's the country seems to still be in a good mood from the election last week. So, uh, nice times basically at the moment. Considering I mean, in comparison to like the sort of like the turmoil in your country this past weekend. So
Yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah.
we went up rabbited like that last night. But I think we hit quite a good couple of topics last night, Amy, and we raised a good few points. I think
I think so too.
you know.
It, yeah, the crazy times, and you know, it's hard to know even what to think anymore about everything that's going on. It's just, and we just talked about, we are going to talk about the Beatles today, which is much more
Mhm.
lighthearted. Um, but yeah, the that 45's document case was dismissed, and then he's going to announce his BP, and and he did really the documents case was dismissed so that he would look good and have no marks on his record because he wants to be nominated. I think he was afraid that he may not be nominated, and now he thinks, well, I'm all
Right?
clear. Now you can nominate me. I have nothing on my record, and now he acts like he can do anything. He can do whatever he wants. He can talk about his victims again because no one's going to, he has all this immunity. So he thinks, um, the day's not done, as they say. But
Well, how close was it? How close could it have come to him not being nominated? Was that ever a possibility?
I think I felt there was a possibility, and I still feel like it could happen. Now, will it? It doesn't seem like anyone ever, like we just talked about. 45 is really good at manipulating people, and like you said, is he? Why is he so lucky? And I was like, well, he's lucky, but also he's just so good at manipulating people to do what he wants, and so
Yeah.
I don't see that ending. They just he's going to manipulate people some more to nominate him somehow back. What does he have secrets on them? Um, and as we all know,
Yeah.
there's many secrets in that whole party at this point. So they
It
probably
reminds
will.
me of Barnum, if that makes sense. It reminds me of Barnum, like P.T.
Yeah.
Barnum, that kind of
Mhm.
a showman that you don't see what's going on
Yeah.
behind the scenes. You just see like he's just the front for this kind of you know mayhem, chaos that's going on and stuff, but again, Amy, just to go back to what we were talking about a bit about what we were talking. Has, has that ever happened before, where like a felon has been able to run before? Are you aware of, or is he the first case of it? Because he is a felon, isn't he? Given his
Well, I honestly don't know, but I would say that he we're all kind of looking at this like what is happening because the problem is it's like a game of chess. He's got all these checkmates and he's got all these people protecting him, and so in any other context in history or our laws, our constitution, he wouldn't be able to get away with any of this. And look at Nixon. Nixon had enough humility to say, yeah, okay, I'm out. I did this and I'm out. um,
mhm.
Hello, Carolyn.
And integrity.
Yeah,
Hello,
integrity and just
Carol.
respect. But see, 45 is, and I've always called him Jim Jones because he is just like, he's the same architect as Jim Jones. And Jim Jones had no, I mean, he was a madman. He really was. Even his own son said, my dad was batshit crazy. Um,
Yeah.
so we're not dealing with a normal person. We're not dealing with a normal situation. This isn't even Nixon. This is far beyond. This is almost like a supernatural occurrence that we're dealing with. So hence all the psychics and intuitives having to get involved because it's like a supernatural war that we're the biggest narcissist that we've ever known besides a Jim Jones. um,
Yeah.
so yeah, there is no history, no other president that would compare to this because it's completely incomparable. It's strange. It's
Yeah.
very
I think he does that. I mean, I know people have said you can't compare him to Hitler and stuff, but on some levels
I
you
always
can.
have.
That idea that, well, yeah, the idea that if like Hitler, if I can't conquer the world, I'll destroy it, basically. And I think Trump is of that mentality. If I can't have it, none of you should have it. I'll blow the entire thing up, so to speak. That comes across. That's why he's particularly dangerous, I think, because he has that mentality.
Yeah. Well, and we just talked about okay, so last night the I was watching one movie and then it ended and another movie came on and it was Silence of the Lambs. So I didn't even choose it. And I never really watched the whole thing. I'd watched part of it with my mom years ago. And of course I know all the story and everything, the famous lines and all that. So, but I was watching it and I watched where she was appointed in the beginning to work with this guy that was a psychiatrist, right? And the guy that's
Yeah.
the FBI director is like, yeah, you better be careful. He was a psychiatrist, and she's studied in criminal law, and she knows all these, has all this expert knowledge. And when he said that to her, I thought, oh, he physically can't get to her most likely, but mentally, if she's weak in any way, he'll get in. And then I thought, well, that's how Trump does that to everyone. He gets in the cracks of their psyche, and and ironically enough, 45 Trump has been comparing himself to Hannibal Lecter lately, which I feel is like his real persona. He's called it. He's actually said it himself, Fatima. And so
Oh, Fatima.
he gets into people's psyche, and he is comparable to Hannibal Lecter. He really is. And just like at the end of the movie, he's probably going to go away to some foreign country. Like, doesn't Hannibal Lecter go to Cape Town or some, like, Guatemala or something? He goes somewhere. And he's still alive, but he's...
And he's taunting people as well, which is probably what Trump would do. I've got away with the entire thing.
Mm-hmm.
I have to say I love Silence of the Lambs. I know that's a bit of a segue into that, but I think that Anthony Hopkins holds the record for the shortest amount of screen time to win the Best Actor Oscar. Don't know whether you knew that. I think he's on screen for something like 19 minutes, and it's just. Do you like it yourself, Amy? The movie Silence of the Lambs, or what's your opinion on it?
Well, it is very sort of psychological, and it's well written, well acted. Jodie Foster is amazing. I mean, she's amazing. It's very fascinating.
Incredible, man.
Yeah.
See, Hannibal Lecter knows from the beginning, as you probably realised. He knows who the killer is. Straight away, he knows he knows who Buffalo Bill is because the legacies are interwoven, but he's perfecting his escape plan. If she turned up and he said that this is who it is, he wouldn't have his chance to escape. So as soon as he meets the Clarice Starling character, he's perfecting his game plan. But then something strange happens, and that he starts to fall in love with her, so to speak, and it sort of she becomes an interest to him, and then you've got the whole idea of like she's the first female CIA agent on like a case like that, and she has to overcome the sexism that exists in the job and stuff, and it's brilliant. I just think it's a brilliantly staged and performed movie, and it's one of the big three that's to win all the to sweep the board at the Oscars. It won the Best Picture, Director, Actor, Actress, and Screenplay. The first one was It Happened One Night with Clark Gable and I forget the name, the actress, and the second one was One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Yes, there you go. Sorry, that was Claudine Colbert. Yeah, I don't know why I forgot her name, but yeah. So those are the three. It Happened One Night, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and Silence of the Lambs. Useless trivia for you there, Amy, but I just thought to go into kind of Roger Ebert mode there for a second.
Well, I remember why. Okay, so Prime does this, or just whatever the streaming. That's the streaming channel I have. I actually had Taxi Driver, and that's what I had picked because it was free, right. And I've been meaning to watch it for a while because it's a great movie, and it's whatever. I shouldn't watch it right now with what's going on in the world, but maybe it does make sense to watch it. But Jodie Foster's in it, obviously, and she's just such an amazing actress. And Robert De Niro's. He studied with who's the guy? He studied with his acting coach. Anyway, he had an acting movie. But
Strasberg, Lee Strasberg.
Yes, that's right.
He was the yeah, he was the father of method acting basically, and
Okay.
actually he was a big mentor to Marilyn Monroe as well. People don't
Oh,
realize Marilyn Monroe was a method actor. They don't realize that, but she was. She used the method just as much as people like Brando or James Dean did. She had to get inside the character's psyche. It's just that the characters she played were close to who she was, basically. But yeah, I think Taxi Driver is kind of.
oh, froze up.
I think. Oh, we went for a second there, Amy.
Yes, I think. Are you okay? You froze up for. I probably froze up
I'm
too.
I'm back. Yeah.
Okay. Well, um, okay.
So,
So we.
Amy, get the
Yeah.
conversation moving. So this week I got the Mind Games box set.
Oh, you did. Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's
That's
in the
so
other room. I should have brought it tonight. Maybe I'll
cool.
get it later on. But yeah, it's brilliant.
Well, I
It's
have the so what? Yeah, what's in the box set? Do you get the LP?
you get the LP. Yeah, you get the photo album that came with the LP, which wasn't with the reissues. You get all like the sort of the rehearsal takes. A bit like the anthology, and both anthology. It's a bit like the Beatles anthology and the John Lennon anthology. I've noticed online people are kind of complaining about Yoko's involvement or Sean's insistence on the sort of the focus being on Yoko when it was an album, when pretty much when they were kind of estranged, weren't they, at that point when they were making it. Mind Games and Walls and Bridges were kind of less John and Yoko albums than what had gone immediately prior.
Yeah. Maybe Carolyn. Maybe. Norma Jean. Yeah.
Maybe, yeah.
Maybe she's
Yeah.
saying hello.
Never know, yeah. Yeah. Have you seen
Okay,
that? What's that joke in Frasier? Oh, sorry. I was just going to say another joke in Frasier where someone goes as Wonder Woman and there's a fancy dress party and someone goes as Wonder Woman, someone goes as Elton John, and someone goes as Marilyn Monroe. And the joke is that Elton John wrote a song about Wonder Woman's real name is Diana Prince, and Elton John wrote a song about Marilyn Monroe, but he also wrote a song about Princess Diana.
Wow.
Oh, she was a cousin.
Are you serious?
Oh, that's
amazing. That's amazing.
Did you ever meet her, Carolyn?
Wow.
Did you ever meet her, Carolyn? That's quite amazing.
Yeah, that's quite amazing. I mean, that's like what? That's a shocking statement, right? That's amazing. That's so cool.
So, well, I'm eager to learn more now from Carolyn.
I remember. Okay, so when I was a kid, they had a movie. Like, wow, that's so cool. All right.
You did meet her, yeah, brilliant.
Nice. Well, I remember. I've always had a lot of compassion for Norma Jean, and I read her biography years ago when I worked at the library. I remember it came in, and I read it, and I have a lot of compassion for her. I think there's two sorts of people. There's people who think that she was just a dumb blonde and she slept with a lot of guys and yada yada, and had affairs with married men. But I saw a lot of the child that was in her, that because she was like John, she was sort of passed around and wasn't really in a solid home and was always seeking attention. But she was incredibly intelligent. I mean, she hung out with my favorite writer, Truman Capote, and he loved her to death. I mean, if he hadn't been gay, they probably would have been. And he wanted her in Breakfast at Tiffany's. And who did she go toward? She must have had a lot of Gemini in her chart because she went with Norman Miller, wasn't it? Norman Mailer. Yeah, she would go with really intelligent people that she loved. She probably would have written.
And apparently, for a while she was in love with Rock Hudson, and and Rock loved her as a friend, but he was never kind of. Rock Hudson was never kind of sure of his own sexuality. I don't think.
For the obvious
and Plus, he had a terrible time with Joe DiMaggio. He was kind of, well, I mean, Caroline will know more, speak more about that, but he was very brutal towards her. Joe, very controlling and brutal. I think a bit jealous of her fame, and he felt kind of out of place amongst like Hollywood friends and that. Tried to isolate her somewhat.
Have you
I
ever
think
seen
from
the movie? Well, have you ever seen the movie where who's the beautiful Michelle Miller? Is it Michelle Miller? Michelle
Michelle Williams. Yeah, yeah.
Williams.
My
Yes.
Week with Madeline. You think?
And yeah, and it was with when she made the movie
Yeah,
with Laurence Olivier, and he had a lot of compassion for her too. I thought that was a
yeah,
very interesting movie.
yeah.
Yeah, it
Eddie
showed.
Redmayne. Eddie Redmayne was in. He
Yes,
played the the producer who was assigned to look after it, and yeah, it it was brilliant, wasn't it? Like you say, that idea of, I suppose, kind of in a way similar, well, identical to what happened with Elvis, in that they became public property, and
yeah,
it stopped being a job. It became the job became the life, and it permeated every part of the life, and you, for whatever reason, they just somewhere in a way that the real sort of personalities got lost, and then like there was those other things, going on there.
well, she said in the book I read that she um, did sort of. I feel like she almost had split personality um, because she created a character, and it was a character that she could survive with, and it was her survival, and that was the soft voice, you know, to almost like a
Yeah,
siren to attract men, and it worked. It worked. But she was very serious inside, so she did have a second personality, and that's a Gemini thing too. I think to create that
yeah.
persona.
The dual aspect of it, and yeah, it's
Hmm.
interesting to think where she might have gone had she lived. Would she have become? I don't know. Would she have gone more for the kind of, like, left the glamour out, which she did want to do, didn't she? She wanted to transcend to roles where she didn't have to play. She wanted to play kind of,
Yeah.
parts that Meryl Streep would go on to play in that. But because she was making far too much money, it just didn't make sense to risk letting her
Yeah.
have a flop and those things.
Yeah, well, you know how I think of Greta Garbo, how she kind of went off and sort of had her own little world after that, and people would seek her out, but she was really done with Hollywood at some point. Um, and John, that's not something that John showed me is that she lived nearby. I think when he was with May Pang, they lived on the east side of New York, east of Central Park, and she had her apartment, and he'd like wait to see if she would. I think he was fascinated with Greta Garbo. I think Marilyn would have been like that, honestly.
Yeah.
She would have had her little private life at some point because Hollywood would
Okay.
have been brutal. Um, or maybe she would have
Yeah.
been like,
Listen,
go ahead.
yeah.
She,
Hollywood literally consumed her. Yeah. Just reading
um,
Caroline's.
you could see her
Yeah.
change as her
Well.
makeup was put on. Yeah, interesting. That's true. Very interesting. Thank you, Carolyn.
Yeah.
Well, look at Elizabeth Taylor. Like I love Elizabeth Taylor, and what did she do? She loved many men, and I think a lot of that is past life things. And you're getting you're getting through a lot of past life karma in one lifetime. So you're with all these karmic relationships. And my mother used to say, and of course I grew up Catholic. My mother said that she didn't want to be Elizabeth Taylor because when she died, all these men would be waiting for her again. She married all these people. What was she going to end up with? Like awkward. But
That is, yeah. That I've often thought about that. Like when you sort of, if you've been married for 30 years and you marry someone else and you with them, for another 30 years, when you go to heaven, how are you kind of sort of
yeah,
divvied up amongst people? It's strange, isn't it? And
yeah,
yeah, it's, I suppose, a great kind of, you talk about soul seeds and things that you've sort of turned me on to there, Amy. But like, I think a great kind of uh, sort of like a kind of immediate predecessor would be Jean Harlow, which kind of, what happened to Jean Harlow health wise and being controlled by her mother was kind of, it was the opposite with Marilyn Monroe, wasn't it? It was like she didn't have anyone looking after
yeah,
them in that sense. But I mean, Jean Harlow, what happened there? That's a horrible, that's a horrible story. Her mother was into Christian Science and wouldn't let her get treated for the kidney ailment she had because she believed.
Mhm.
Um, divinity would cure it, and
Yeah. Of
you
course,
know,
back
I
then
think she was
she didn't.
28.
She, with that, how long would she have lived anyway? But you're right. That's, it's terrible. She was way far too young to go through that. And um, wasn't it Clark Gable? He loved her. Um, and oh, look at
Uh,
that. Carolyn says, sat on her lap. She kissed my forehead. She always told me, and she loved children. So that is so sweet. That's amazing. That's really amazing. I love that. Well,
I
she
think
did seem
actually,
like she would have had kids. See, Carolyn, you saying that's what would have happened to her. She would have had kids, and that would have been another part of her life. I really
well, I think
feel.
the studio actually forced her into having abortions, didn't they?
Oh,
Because
it's terrible.
they
And it's
felt
not.
they felt like being a mother, or I don't know, being an
Yeah,
unwed mother or whatever it was, would affect their image, which is horrible to think of, isn't it? Why should the image come before someone's personality? You
yeah,
know, Debbie Harry, of course. Debbie Harry believed she was Marilyn Monroe's daughter, didn't she, for a long time, because she was adopted, and I think she'd spoken to people who put the notion in her head that because she looked like her somewhat. I don't know whether she really did look like her, but where she was adopted from the same agency where allegedly Madeline had gave her baby up to, that it was a possibility.
yeah. I
That
agree.
would have been her entire life. Yeah.
Yeah, I really, that resonates very strongly. Like I could totally see her with babies, and here's the thing. Okay, so Britney Spears, when this whole thing happened with Britney last year with the conservator thing,
Yeah.
um, I saw a lot of Marilyn Monroe in her face, and I thought, well, let me go look at her chart. And their charts are, see, people's charts can be sort of flipped, but they have a lot of the same elements, and they did, and you could see. And now I'm not saying they're related in any way, but I think on a spiritual level, Britney is a lot like Marilyn Monroe, and a lot of what was happening to her was just like Marilyn. And her kids got taken away, and um, so, and I saw she would get out of the conservatorship with her dad. But yeah, it's very similar, isn't it? So it's, yeah, sad. Uh,
Yeah. It's like you think that people would say, well, we can't let that happen again to people, but it does happen all the time,
yeah,
and it will keep happening sadly as long as people can make money, they're gonna be put on that podium, there's always someone getting rich off someone, unfortunately, where it
yeah.
goes. You and
Well,
that. So yeah. So I was saying about the Mind Games box set, I think you really like it, Amy. It on sort of just on a kind of visual level, it's amazing the way it looks and that, and the way it's presented in the box itself, and that, and then all the things that come with it, and that. But there's also there's a recording of a three-way conversation between John, Julian, and May Pang that was recorded. That's been left on it. Prior to him recording, have you heard Yaya?
yeah, he had it
He
on
did
walls.
it. He did a bit where he played. Yeah, but he plays the drums on it and that, and there's like a nice little back and forth between Julian and John. Then that gives an insight into. Um, you can tell that it's easy to say this because we know what happened, but you can tell that Julian totally idolized his father, but was a bit frightened of him as well. That
Yeah,
kind of, or at least he was frightened of upsetting him or letting him down.
yeah,
And you can tell
pressure.
John is trying to. John does. He's trying his best to sound sort of paternal and loving, but it does sound like a music teacher.
Hmm.
That kind of a music teacher and a student. That's the way it comes across. That. What's your favorite track from the album, Amy, from Mind Games?
Well, I have the album because I bought it probably at a Beatles fest or something. I don't know how I got it. So I have it. It's one of my favorite things that I have. And of course, Mind Games will always be one of my favorite songs. And I love that video
It's
of him in
amazing.
Central Park.
Yeah.
But that one day when because I love Wider Shade of Pale, and every time I hear that, I'm like, oh, that's how he got. He may not have known
Uh,
that he wrote Mind Games after that song, but I really feel that.
well,
But
I didn't realize it until you pointed it out, and now you can. It's apparent, isn't it? You can see how, like you say, whether subconsciously it was a steal or he was just inspired by it. You can really tell when you
yeah.
know. How would you take that? I wonder if you were a member of Procol Harum, would you think he ripped us off, or would you think that's a brilliant, someone as good as John Lennon
Yeah.
to be influenced by us to that point?
Yeah, they may not have known, but because it's amazing how things can pass by, you don't notice it. But or maybe they're like, wow, he must have liked. He did love that song. He loved Whiter Shade of Pale. But I love that
Yeah,
song, and I also love Intuition and um,
yeah,
Isumisen. Was it? I'm sorry. There's a lot of
yeah.
beautiful songs on there, but I love Walls and Bridges more. I think I really love Walls and Bridges. It's a beautiful album, and it's just John. It's like pure 100% John Lennon, and I don't know if that's why I love it, but I just love Walls and Bridges. I think that every song in there, Steel and Glass, and Nobody Loves
Oh,
You When
that's
You're Down.
amazing. Yeah,
Those are great, and Number
yeah,
Nine Dream, and those are great songs. I mean, there's great songs.
yeah. Surprise, surprise. That's it. That's
Yeah,
it. Kind of yeah. But I think Walls and Bridges, for me, that's very much like John's Band on the Run. You know, I know
maybe.
you could say that Band on the Run is Paul's Imagine, maybe, but it's it's like the idea that they were in friendly competition with one another. That John said that in one of his last interviews, didn't he? He said the best we can hope for is that I do something that makes Paul get off his ass, and then Paul does something that makes me want to go back in the studio. And if they weren't working together, he said that would be the best arrangement for it. And but yeah, I agree. I think Walls and Bridges, like I say, that for me is John's uh, Band on the Run. It feels like he really sort of got his act together at that point, and he found his muse again. Maybe it was, I don't know, maybe being away from Milk, maybe it was Maypang kind of positive influence. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't know. I like Old Dirt Road. There's just so many songs, and the whole concept of the album, everything about it, I just love. Because I feel like John, there was different parts of John. There was psychedelic, obviously, and there's a whole like mod, and then the rocker, the Teddy Boy. But I feel like his pure essence was right there in New York in the mid '70s. That was like his really pure essence. It was just full John. So, but
Oh,
I love the
yeah,
songs. I love the songs. I love Imagine too. I love all the songs, and so whatever. I love all of them. But I do love that album. But Mind Games is very special because it's almost, how Imagine was very political, and I feel like Mind Games was more introspective of, I don't know. It was just kind of him being poetic and
yeah. He said himself, did he, that sometime in New York City, he said it stopped being art and it became journalism because it's like,
yeah.
every song was like a report on something. And he got away from, he said he was getting away from what made him want to do music in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Like he said, he never wanted to become a journalist, but by the time of Sometime in New York City, I love Sometime in
I
New
love
York City,
that.
but
I love
by
that
the
album.
time of that, he'd become a musical journalist and he was reporting on what was going on kind of in the counterculture at that time. And
Mhm.
yeah, I think Mind Games and then Walls and Bridges is in rediscovering his form prior to his what would you call it? Well, it wasn't the last weekend. It was his 5 year sabbatical, wasn't it? With Ray Sean. And
Oh yeah. Um, House husbandry, as he said. Well, okay, so
bacon bread.
yeah, bacon bread, and so isn't it sometime in New York City? My uh, my composition writing teacher, whatever, in college, she recorded that for me. It is a double album, and I just remember that I love all the songs in there. I love the If You Have the Luck of the Irish, and Woman is the Bleep. That song that was very true. I mean, every time I've heard that song, I remember my friend said, and this is years after I was playing it, so it was years after it had ever happened, and she got really mad. She's like, "How dare he say that?" And I was like, "But he's right," because I'd had the same thought. Like, you could go out and a man could go out and he could be racially profiled and then come home and beat up his wife. And the thing about being a woman is you're always still at the bottom. And look at what's happening in our world. I mean, it's actually really
Yeah,
relevant what the words in that song. But people just don't like to hear maybe the way he said it. I don't think he would say it these days. He wouldn't use that word. But he was right though. He was right about it. But that
But I mean,
album
in that
got in
sense,
trouble.
I mean, that's using words and dialogue as a weapon to emphasize his point. He wasn't laughing at the situation, was he? He wasn't saying woman is bleep and isn't it brilliant. He was saying woman is bleep and this is terrible and we need to reevaluate how we're going about things
Mhm.
and prove me wrong and that. And I like that song the way it sounds like a striptease. It's kind of very seductive the way it unfolds and that. And consider the importance of what he's saying, you know, and that. And but yeah, have you seen that on? Is it the Dick Cavett show where he defends the use of the word?
Yeah. And I think he
He
actually
comes.
sings it on the show, but he gets in trouble for that. I think that he had a lot of trouble because
Is
people
that right?
still,
Yeah, I didn't know.
yeah.
Yeah, they got in trouble for it. Yeah, yeah. So what is your favorite of? Would you say of his solo output? Do you have a favorite like album or song, or do you just love everything he did?
Yeah, I pretty much love everything he did. I mean, there's probably a few songs that I thought, well, I could give or take that. Um, uh, that I love Walls and Bridges. I love them all. I love Plastic Ono Band. I love Imagine. I've always said if I was stuck on an island with a record player, I don't know how this would work without electricity, but probably Imagine would be the album I would want to have. But I also
I've
love, I
never
love
thought about that before, actually. Yeah,
somehow you'd make
you
it work.
raise a good point, Amy. Yeah, but why would you? You know what? Yeah, no, it's a good point, isn't it? Yeah, if you were on a desert island, how would you be able to play the music?
That whole theory, it's like goes out the window and you put the logistics
You've
together to go,
solved
yeah,
it, Amy.
you have to spin it
Yeah,
yourself. But what they do on
yeah.
Gilligan's
What do you
Island?
think? Gilligan's Island, yeah. I used to love Gilligan's. I used to watch Gilligan's Island. Do you know, to this day, I get that theme tune stuck in my head. At the strangest of, it's coming to me mind that like
Yeah,
job interviews or exams, even funerals. It goes through my head. It's a jaunty little number that
that show.
once you hear it, it stays in there.
Yeah, it's a great show. I feel like that show inspired SpongeBob. I've told my kids that I'm
Yeah, I
like,
can
oh,
see that.
it's
Yeah.
Gilligan's Island, and also the monkeys, and yeah, I feel like that's where SpongeBob came from was Gilligan and the skipper and all that.
Yeah, I hadn't considered. Yeah, but you're right again, Amy. Yeah, yeah. You're a fan of the monkeys, aren't you?
Oh
You've said in the
yes,
past you like them.
yeah, I love the monkeys.
Yeah. So were you aware of the Beatles before the monkeys, or the monkeys before the Beatles, or was it like a kind of simultaneous thing?
Well, growing up, everybody knew about the Beatles, and the monkeys weren't as much when I was growing up, but they did start to show the reruns on TV. And so I remember we watched and we laughed and we thought, and of course to me Peter was like SpongeBob. He was the character that he wasn't the main character, but he was because everything sort of revolved around what happened to Peter Tork,
Yeah,
you know. In the show.
he was the breakout character, wasn't he? He was kind of like the Fonz of the monkeys in that sense. And yeah,
Because
do
he was
you
so
remember the
bold.
new monkeys from the late
Oh
'80s? Do you remember that?
yeah,
God,
yeah, not into that.
but
No, but
that's
the
like
monkeys
doing
were
the new
special.
Beatles.
Yeah, I love them all. I love them. You know what's funny is that there's that one thing on Dick Clark. You watch the old clip where they had their album was a hit, like number one, and then Sergeant Pepper came out. It's like what
Yeah,
luck.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. I meant to ask you about that before. Good point, actually. I know Paul McCartney was a fan of Pet Sounds, wasn't he? But I don't know whether John was a fan of Pet Sounds. Have you ever heard John's viewpoint on what he thought about it? I know Paul thinks it's like one
Not
of the
as
greatest albums of all time.
yeah,
Yeah.
not as much as Paul, but he did obviously they loved Brian Wilson because he was a great song or is he's still around a great songwriter and it was much more than just beach music, which you could equate it to like Jan and Dean. They kind of perfected that beach sound, but the Beach Boys and Brian Wilson in particular he's a genius. And I've listened to Pet Sounds too, and I've told you the first time I heard it, I thought I don't know. And then it crept in, and I was like, oh my God, this is one of the greatest albums I've ever heard. So it's weird. So I think John knew, but see, the thing about John was he was too busy creating his own stuff, I think, and he
Right.
would like something that was more rock that would hit him. But Paul sort of he could get more into that because it was more aligned with how
He's
he
more
wrote.
pop. Yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe
it was
that
more
maybe
style.
that was the distinction between the two. Maybe Paul was more pop and John was more rock or
I think so. Yeah,
alternate pop.
I feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Although I mean, Paul Come Together was Paul's arrangement, wasn't it? John wanted it to be more kind of up and kind of Chuck Berry like, which would have
Yeah,
got him into big trouble if he'd gone ahead. And
that's true.
Paul slowed it down to that swampy sound that it is now. Come together and
Mhm.
nothing. Yeah, that was unwise. We were supposed to use that Here Come Old Flat Top. It's amazing how just that one like lyric can get you in so much trouble financially, isn't it? But it did.
Well, what's funny is here you go again. It passed over me. I'd listened to Chuck Berry probably because, well, everybody knew who Chuck Berry was, but because John loved him so much, and I thought, okay, I'll listen to, and I love Chuck Berry, and I even did a cover of the song Memphis, Tennessee, and so I've heard the "You Can't Catch Me." That's what it's based off of. Um,
Yeah, that's it.
And
Yeah.
so, and I never put the two and two together until one day I was like, oh, John ripped that off. John totally ripped that off from Chuck Berry. So I didn't know he'd gotten in trouble for it until just now that you
Yeah, he
said,
got. But he had to record 3 Chuck Berry songs on like Nothing of the Rock and Roll album
yes,
because
I love
of
that.
that. Because
Yeah,
that's amazing. It's an amazing album. Yeah.
it is.
Did you ever have Paul's equivalent of it, which is Run Devil Run? He
I have his
he
shuffle
did.
off. I've got the Russian album he did of like
Oh,
50s. I
that
love
yeah,
that. That's a great album.
yeah, yeah. It's a good album. But in 1999, he did an album called Run Devil Run, where he did covers of his favorite songs from the '50s, and it's kind of he wanted to do it before, but it was too similar to. He felt that John had kind of hit the nail on the head when he did it because he'd done it and he'd done his own versions of it, rather than just copying them verbatim. So it took like 25 years to do it, but it's an interesting way to the way it
Yeah,
comes out.
I
Yeah,
love that. Well, I have this memory, and this is my own memory. It's like not connected to anyone else in the world, Paul or anybody, but listening to John Lennon rock and roll, and I think I had it on cassette. And so I had like a Walkman thing with the earphones,
right.
and smoking in my mother's garage in her house, listening to that nuclear rock and roll, and smoking a cigarette in my mother's garage and hoping not to get caught. And that's just so appropriate for the whole situation, I think, you know.
Definitely. Yeah. That's rock and roll. You push the
Yeah,
boat out there.
you're
I
right.
didn't know you'd smoked. I assumed you were. Sorry, I mean, I'm not criticizing you for having smoked. I just assumed you wouldn't have been the sort of person who did it, Amy.
Now here's the thing. So I guess we'll talk about that. And by the way, Trump announced JD Vance as his VP. Now, I've been saying because Spirit told me for like a month now. First, they said he didn't want to pick anybody because Trump only wanted to be his own. He doesn't want a vice president. And we'll get back to our topic.
Yeah,
But then Spirit kept saying JD Vance, and the whole time I kept hearing JD Vance, and I didn't even know who JD Vance was. I didn't even know how bad he was. The other pick was Christy Noem, who killed her dog, because Trump would pick someone that evil, to be honest. And but they kept saying
yeah.
JD Vance, JD Vance, and I said that, and sure enough, he picked him because he's an
He's
evil,
picked Vance. Yeah,
and he'll do what Trump wants. They'll do it together. But he's not good. See, it's really stupid of him because, Trump says, "Oh, I'm not doing the project. You know what?" Which is like a madman's manifesto. Project, you know what? Have you heard of it? The whole 20 blah blah blah.
I know what you mean, but like it'd be good if you just explain. Yeah,
Yeah, it's like
yeah,
all the bad things you could do to women and against the Constitution and deport immigrants and everything that's basically un-American. And it's a madman's manifesto, like a guy that wants to blow up something because he got scorned by a woman or his boss. His
yeah.
boss fired him, and he wrote a manifesto, and then he's going to go blow up the building. That's what this project thing is. And so JD Vance is full on. So when 45 says, "Oh, I'm not connected to this," yes, he is. Yes, he is.
Yeah,
He told me on TV right now. It's sad. So
well,
why would anyone want to vote for that as an American? I want to know. It's just like the worst.
I agree. Yeah, why would anyone want to vote for that? And it's just the mind boggles. Like I say, I mean, what happened over the weekend? I worry that it's made them untouchable now. If you pardon the pun there, it's
As a,
elevated into to martyr
because
level.
now, if no matter if it was a setup or not, now a whole bunch of people really don't like the guy. And I've always seen that there's going to be women that he did things to that are going to just go. And now this, yeah, we don't want to. I don't want to drag this down. We can talk about it later, but I see it on
Okay,
TV.
yeah. I
Yeah.
was just one more question though. So hypothetically, if Biden was to take himself out, if he bowed down to the party pressure, what would Kamala Harris then automatically be in line to take over, or would there have to be a vote to within that situation to see who takes over?
I
What's the? I
honestly,
mean, I'm asking you like you've got all the answers, Amy, but you do
uh,
know what you're talking about.
I don't know. And I don't know. I do know this that if Biden dropped out, I think there would be another candidate that would come in, and he may not pick Kamala Harris. Then the new he or she may not pick Kamala Harris. But
Right.
I don't. There. Here's the thing. There's not enough time. They would have to give up all the donations, and there's been massive donations. They've already bought time slots for political ads all the way up to the election, and it's just not. You'd have to certify him in all the states to be on the ballot, the new person, man or woman, and so it's just not going to happen. Biden's not going to drop out at this point. I really can't see it happening, um, and I don't think it would be a good idea anyway. It would just, it shows such
Yeah.
um, insecurity and fear, and that's really not a good time to. And he doesn't need to. He's fine.
Yeah.
He's
There you
fine.
go. Yeah. Well, I hope it. Well, yeah. Let's fingers crossed. I mean, he like you said, he's beaten once before. He'll beat him again.
He's the only one who's ever
Fingers crossed.
beat Trump on anything. So that's. But yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, never say never. But I don't see Biden dropping out. I think that yeah, they're trying to make it look like, there's that whole psychology of someone walks in a room and you say, "You don't look so good," and the person was fine, but now the rest of the day they feel sick, and the next day they call in sick because now their brain, they got someone. And that's what I feel like they did to Biden at voters. They said, "Gee, you don't look good." And did he do good at the debate? No, he did not do good at the debate. But I think there was a lot of factors that went into that, and he was fine after. He was fine the next day. He's fine now. So I feel very strongly about it because it would be. I don't know. I don't know. We just. I felt like it was a lot of psyop to make us doubt, and it did.
Yeah.
I hate that it worked. I really hate that it worked.
I like the John. I saw Jon Stewart's assessment of the situation on the Daily Show, where he kind of he answered the problem. Like the proposition, why aren't you sort of criticizing Biden? So he criticized Biden, but then he criticized Trump immediately after, and there was far more to be worried about with Trump than what there is with Biden getting people's names wrong and and having a bad first debate and stuff.
You know, who's the guy? Have you ever seen Office Space, where the guy with the
Yeah,
stapler boss comes in and says, "Yeah, I'm going to need you to," and he keeps manipulating him, and he just plays with him like he's a mouse. And finally, doesn't he have a wreck, and he's in a cast, and they're passing around birthday cake, and the guy is just, everybody treats him like crap. But in the end, he wins. Doesn't he win some huge
yeah,
settlement or something? I don't know. I
yeah.
feel
He
like
wins at the end. Like you said, the seeds of doubt they're trying to administer them, aren't they, to jeopardize us. But
yeah.
anyway, I'm going back to the Beatles thing, Amy. I wanted to. So you watched the Linda McCartney story recently?
Yes, I
You were
did.
telling me, yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I think it's really good. Actually, it's one of the better TV movie biopics based on the Beatles that I've seen. I think it's actually really good. I think Elizabeth Mitchell was a really good choice to play Linda
Yeah.
McCartney, and she did a good job playing her.
Yeah, and the first scene where they're in the her photography exhibit, which is probably one of the first times Linda got to have sort of her name back to herself, you know, her
Yeah,
um, because she really joined Paul in a lot of his music. Um, I thought, I don't know about this actress. But then when they went back to the 60s, I felt like she channeled her beautifully. I felt like she really picked up on Linda's character and her humor even. And
yeah,
she had a very earthy, natural, and she had a sense of humor, which is why I think Paul and her got along so well because they both had a similar humor.
yeah.
Um,
But she
and I like,
started talking with a Liverpool accent, which was
yeah,
bizarre. I think if you in
yeah.
later, she really started. Same with Barbara Bach as well, which is weird because Ringo's lost his. It's like Ringo's lost his, and Barbara's absorbed it and speaks with it.
Yeah,
But
I thought
yeah, Elizabeth Mitchell.
yeah, Linda did too.
Elizabeth Mitchell, I agree. I think, yeah, I think she did channel her in many ways, and she got to the heart of who the real Linda McCartney was. I thought.
Well, you know, we're okay. So Mick Jagger and okay, here's what I thought was really cool. And if you watch the movie, and I've watched it a few times now, um, if you notice the photographs on the wall, all the photos were recreated, all of them with the actors. And the
Yeah,
music was recreated, and I thought that was very clever. It must have been a lot of fun, especially for a low budget, because I think it was VH1 did a lot of those movies in like late '90s, early 2000s. I was like, wow,
yeah,
they recreated almost, maybe not all of them, but almost every single photo you see in that movie was recreated. So, and then she's the one that took the picture of Brian Jones being very sexual, you know, sitting back and him with Mick Jagger.
yeah,
And that's what got her
yeah,
into, yeah, that's what got her in with Brian Epstein, the Beatles manager. He saw that and was like, wow, a female did that. And she got them to relax so much that the real
yeah,
picture came out and very risque, you know, not very teen magazine appropriate. Um, but when she's in that photo shoot and Mick Jagger's coming on to her, and I don't know if she really slept, like some people have said, was Linda a groupie? Maybe. That was her business, though. She was a free spirit. Um,
yeah.
but you know, and he's like, I want to, you know, bleep you, and she's like, where? And he says, down below the ship, and she's like, when? And I felt like that would be something Linda would say because Linda did have that very free spirit. Um,
Yeah,
um, yeah, I felt that was very appropriate, and I felt she channeled Linda there. Um, and
yeah,
then
yeah,
when she meets Paul again after they go out that first night from the because there's the bag of nails, um, and he stops her on the way to the bathroom, you know, and the what is it the next when she's at the Sergeant Pepper release in Brian's flat, and they recreate where she gets down on her knees and it takes this picture, and you know, in the picture, Paul's kind of pensive, like he's got a cigarette, and he's kind of guarded.
yeah,
And I think that just
yeah,
intuitively, I've always picked up from that photo that he's really checking her out. Like, I really like her, but I've got Jane Asher, and
yeah.
Jane Asher's probably at the party, most likely.
Probably, yeah, yeah,
Um, they've
um,
they're off and on, yeah. But he's really
yeah,
thinking, I've always said I would not get married. But she's really beautiful and very interesting. And I think Paul really was in that moment thinking, is this, you know, what's going on? Is this my future? And she's very relaxed though. She's got the camera. She's in control. She's got the
yeah,
control. I really love that
yeah.
about, and they recreated that. And the question she asked him, and she says, Sergeant Pepper, how did you create that? And he says, oh, well, what is it? Somebody said salt and pepper, and I thought Sergeant Pepper, and I felt like that was very organic. That Paul Wood, that's how his brain works. That made sense to me how
Yeah.
they did that. Yeah,
No, it's a good point. I think, uh, yeah, he was searching for that strong woman, wasn't he? You know, because he kind of, I, it's like kind of, they reached the point where, like, you know, women were just available at a certain point in the 60s, and it's terrible to say it, but
yeah,
you know, it became just like he said himself. It was just he didn't want that anymore. That kind of the constant, you know, kind of open door, people coming in
yeah.
and going. You know what I mean? Constantly in his life, he needed that stability. That
Well,
probably kind of the strongest person in his life since his mother in that respect.
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it doesn't help.
yeah,
It doesn't hurt that she was extremely beautiful and again very earthy. And she and Paul both had very similar hooded eyes. They had this sort of angelic
yeah,
eyes. But you know, talking
yeah.
about groupies, the apple scruffs outside his house, that scene
Oh
where
yeah.
she goes in and Paul comes in later and kisses her, and he's like, "You got here," and she's like, "Yeah," and she said, "Who are those girls out there?" And he said, "Oh, the apple scruffs, but you know, don't worry about them." And then he turns out the light, which is very suggestive, and one of the girls outside goes, "Bitch." I just thought that was so funny. That always makes
Yeah,
me laugh.
yeah, it's yeah. They were always going to be there, wasn't it? I tell you what, there was one aspect that really moved me actually. The sense that they weren't afraid to say that in Paul's life when uh, virtually every time he lost someone who meant something to him, you know, a loved one who died, he
Yeah,
never got the chance to say goodbye, and you could tell it weighed on him heavily. So that when he knew Linda was dying, he really did take the time to sort of to say
yeah.
goodbye over
I
over
cried.
over a number of months.
I cried
Yeah,
so much.
it
Yeah.
yeah,
It was
it's
different watching it like that, and you really felt like you were watching the event because we've all heard the
yeah,
story. Of how he told her that she was on her horse and it was a beautiful day, and then she passed away, and that was uh, a gentle
yeah,
and wise, mature way to let her go. And he didn't want to let her go, but seeing it like that played out, I cried so hard. I really can't watch that scene again. But yeah, you're right. That was, and the guy that played what's his name? He played Paul. He was in Backbeat. Um,
Gary Bakewell, yeah,
okay,
he played
yeah.
part. Yeah, he's in Backbeat. Yeah,
Is
he did a good job. He's not from Liverpool. He's Scottish, but you wouldn't know that. You'd think he perfects the
Yeah.
accent perfectly,
Well, I felt
and the
each.
progression in the accent.
You're right. You're right. Well, I felt each time I watched it now, I thought, this guy really stole the show, to be honest, because she did great in the role as Linda. But to be honest, he deserves a lot of credit. I felt he did a wonderful job playing Paul, and the way even some, not just his accent, but his intonations, I thought were very beautiful. In the scene where she cuts off her hair because the chemo, her hair's falling out, and he
Yeah,
finds it on the pillow, and he walks to the bathroom, and she's cutting off her hair, and he could have said something terrible like, "Oh my God, look at you," or "Why are you doing that?" or "Your hair."
yeah,
But he says, "You've never looked more beautiful," and I just thought that was something that Paul would say, because I think that Paul has a very gentle. He's Gemini, but he has a very gentle, um, empathetic spirit, and I could totally see
yeah.
Paul saying he really did love her. He loved her a lot. Still loves her. I
I
thought that
I
was.
mean, even the scene where John had died and they're watching it on TV and they're
Yeah.
watching, he's watching the negative kind of fallback about his what he said and that, and what he says, but you'll never forget him. And
Yeah,
he
and that's
basically
so
says,
true.
John,
Yeah.
yeah, John, not John now. Like, and that to this day, John still exists in Paul's head in many ways, and he still thinks about him and still dreams about him. I mean, you'd know that more than most, Amy. John is and Linda too, I presume, are still big parts of Paul's lives, aren't they? And they always will be.
It was interesting. And by the way, I think you probably know this, but I woke up today and it said this is the anniversary of Julia Lennon being killed. She was run over by a police officer, an drunk off duty police officer, which I felt started John's hatred of a lot of law because the guy didn't get held accountable. His mother literally was murdered, and the guy wasn't
Yeah.
held accountable. And John, that always made him sort of hate establishment and things like that. Um,
There's,
but that hasn't passed by me that today is the anniversary of Julia's death and how horrible that would be.
yeah,
She
I
was,
mean,
yeah,
that was uh, it. Telling that I built something about that. The people when the Beatles first in Liverpool, when they became kind of famous to people other than the people who'd seen them in the cavern, and when they started making the newspaper headlines and whatnot, and a lot of people uh, like can't were puzzled by John. Like, where have you heard that name before? And
huh,
Lennon. And then of course it was because that was a big story in Liverpool at the time. In fact, there was this isn't much reported, but it's a fact that when that happened, there was nearly a riot because of it. Whether John was aware of it, I'm not sure. But when his mother was killed, there was nearly a riot because of it, because a lot of sorts of people knew the policeman involved with it was drunk and he was off duty when he did it. Also, I mean,
Yeah.
this is not widely touched upon, but they'd moved the body into the back of the police. Do you know the story, Amy? They'd actually moved the mother's body into the back of the police car, presumably to say, oh, she wasn't dead upon impact or whatever, so they could fabricate some kind of way around it and pin the blame on her. But it was obvious to everyone that the policeman was drunk. And when that came out, when the city at large heard about it people did really take it badly because they felt that was no way for the policeman to behave.
It's he's a young guy. They wanted to cover it up, obviously. I've read about John's sister, Julia, and how she described, but there was a lot of hush about it. I mean, they just sort of hid the whole thing, and I'm
well,
just going to read.
Maybe wouldn't allow John to talk about it, would he? And
yeah, nobody was really allowed to.
Yeah. Mimi wouldn't allow John to talk about Julia dying. Like, she wouldn't allow him to talk about George dying when his Uncle George died. She wouldn't let him cry.
Yeah. And you're right. It was always, and that's what they did with Brian Epstein too. It was very similar. That's why I think John finally had to just say enough of that. Okay, so I wrote about it in the book, not to always mention my book or anything. But he talks about
it's a brilliant book, though.
Well, thank you. Where is it where I talk about his mother? And that's why the whole thing with James Joyce, I hadn't read Ulysses until after I'd written this book, which I felt I really did channel John. And the portions that I write about Julia sound a lot like what James Joyce wrote about his mother in Ulysses, which I can't find it now. So maybe I'm not meant to read it. I don't know. I talk about her death in here, and Julia, blah 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 blah. I don't know.
So, Amy, can I ask you then?
Yeah, there it is, but I'll read it later.
So, this probing question, but it does interest me. This. So, how can I say this? Mm-hmm. We got this theory that you and Julia are connected in a big way. I mean, well, the theory that we both have that you presented and I believe in. So, thinking about the death, how does that affect you as a person when that comes up? Is it
John's death?
Something that feels familiar? No, Julia's death. How does when it's sort of the subject of Julia dying out? How does that affect you? When thinking about it, is it a shock or?
It's always made me sad. There's that one song. I always think of the song and I think of Buddy Holly too, because they sort of seem combined in a way because they happen in very like a close. I think Buddy Holly died first. I could be wrong about that. There's that song called Tragedy. Do you know that song? It's like a 1950s, and it's right around the same time. Tragedy. Ooh, tragedy. It's very haunting, and I hear it and I think of Julia when I think of John.
She comes to mind. Yeah.
But I used to I had dreams of being in my car all the time.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you have any kind of connection to the accident itself or anything?
I used to tell people, I had another dream that I died in a car accident or a car hit me. And each time in the dream, I would look over my body and go, I'm dead. I'm still here, but there's my body. And so now it kind of makes sense to me. What was it on her birthday, which is March 12th here in America? It's whatever. That day, John showed up on the floor. And then I walked in the room and there was a song called Julie, oh, Julie. And it's a 50s song in the same year that she died. And then right after was 8 Days a Week by the Beatles. And see, that's how John talks to me. And so I've always, if I ever want to doubt, he comes around but he's always made me feel like I was yeah, I was his mother, and I've always felt that too. I felt very strongly when I started to connect with him that not just his mother, but other entities, and but I very strongly connected with her, and I had a lot of 1940s things that I don't know. It's weird. It's hard to explain, but I always felt like a love for him as a child, and in many ways, everything about him, I've always thought, yeah, it's hard to
Yeah.
see. I have my words fail me, but I do feel that very
Yeah,
strongly. I
I
really do.
subscribe to the theory that you are his mother. Basically, just I, as you know, like it's sporadic my own communication with John, but when I have communicated with him, I do get that kind of protective kind of
Yeah.
sense. If
It's
he's being protective of you, and also I think in a way he's jealous of anyone taking your time. If that makes sense, that
me.
that comes across very potently. That the idea that
And
I
not
could be
doing.
spending this time with you, and that's what comes across, and that I do believe it. I get those feelings. I've never felt that he was kind of he was looking at you as like a sister, for instance. You know what I mean? It always feels like that. You are more important to him in that respect.
It's interesting. Well, he's still John. That's what's funny is when people say when somebody passes on, and I do feel there's the John that is almost like a saint to a lot of people and a lot of psychics. He comes to a lot of psychics almost like an ascended master. I feel that very
Yeah.
strongly. Um, but with me, I always feel it's different, and it's not to make me feel special because I've always like almost tried to reject it and couldn't. But it is different. It's very close, very different, and it explains this connection because I've tried to talk to people my whole life about this weird connection I have with John, and have never been
Mhm.
able to. Um, but it makes sense that I would have been his mother. It absolutely makes sense. It really does, and I do feel like he
It makes
keeps
sense
me
to
to
me as well.
himself. Yeah,
Yeah. I think I'm a kind of me personally. Like, I've got good intuitions for these things. So if someone says, no, if someone came to me and said, "Oh, I used to be Napoleon," and they were lying about it, I think it'd be easy to ascertain you're wrong. But I felt that connection before you said it as much. Like I was like build myself up for that awkward conversation where I was going to say to you, have you ever considered that you might have been Julia Lennon in a previous life? But you said it before because you'd already arrived there yourself. So that
yeah.
kind of confirmed my own thoughts on the matter. But yeah, there's no doubt in my mind actually about it, Amy. I honestly do believe that is the case. I do believe you are the sort of the you currently, Amy. You are like the kind of the next
Wow.
reincarnation of Juliet
That
and
would
people prior to that.
it makes sense why I would write about him and why he would trust me to do all of that. But it is hard. It's very isolating too to be able to have that and not be able to talk in a normal way to people about it besides you or a few other people because it's something that's been my whole life and you can't talk to people about things like this. It's almost like I equate it to the movie God with John Denver and George Burns, and he's
Oh
the only one
yeah,
God, and every time he tries to go out and tell people, they're like, "Oh yeah, you're crazy." But he knows what's happening and it is happening. And then at the end
yeah,
there's the whole trial and they record it and at the end there's no recording because he's not allowed. You have to have faith. But it's very
yeah.
isolating. You feel very alone and you're like, "Oh my god, this thing's happening. It's my whole life,
Mm.
but I can't talk about it to people without them criticizing me."
Yeah.
So,
People aren't prepared to think out of their own little windows sometimes, are they? But there's other people who, are much more open minded and accepted of it. And like I said, it's for me, all like the sort of like the pieces fit together. And
yeah.
you, I think you, I think you kind of radiate the same kind of essence as Julia, if that makes sense.
And I also
Sorry, it sounds very good, but I mean, that's the feeling I get. Like you give off the same energy, even though we don't have video footage to watch of Julia.
yeah, and that's
It
strange.
permeates through nothing. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you something. I do think it's a twin flame, which I hate the twin flame thing, but I do think it's that. And I have a lot of experiences that John had. Like, I've talked about he had Aunt Mimi, I had Aunt Khaki. He went back and forth between houses. I went back and forth in between two houses. My Aunt Khaki gave me my first guitar. Aunt Mimi got him his first guitar. I was in a float in a high school thing with Buddy Holly playing. He was on a float. It's a lot of very similar. And I even look like him.
Yeah.
Like the other day at work, I saw myself in the mirror and I was like, "Oh my god, I look like John today." Um, it's a
Yeah.
strange thing. It's really strange.
A couple of weeks back, you had a picture of him in the background of him when he was in the Beatles, and you were next to, it, and it looked like kind of like two faces, like then and now photograph. It
It's
was,
strange. Yeah. Okay.
but like I say, it goes beyond the physical. There's something else there to it. It's not just a resemblance, because you can sit there and like kind of analyze anyone and match them together, but there's something that goes beyond that with you. You give off the same kind of energy that he does, like I say, and kind of. I think the political thing as well. No, like what you've been doing recently with your political videos. Don't mean to say that you're kind of aping him in any way or trying to be that way. I think just
It's natural.
by way of osmosis, that's how you are. Yeah, it's natural. It comes from you in the same way. It comes from the same place. Basically, that's what I get from it.
I think he gives me a lot of information, to be honest. There's
Right.
a lot of things where I'm like, yeah, he's the one that's like, like, oh, so he tattletales, and other people like, well, my cards say, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm getting this completely different thing,
He's
and
your deep throat. That's it. You know
yeah,
that all the presidents meant. John is your deep throat. He doesn't meet you in the car park to hand over money to get it. He whispers it in your ear. That's a good
yeah,
way of looking at it.
it's funny. Yeah, it's funny because I've always known everything that Trump, I hate saying his name, and all them are up to. And it's because I really feel like John's like, tell him that, what he's doing. And I'll say it. And sure enough, it turns out to be true. Not all the time, but almost all the time. It's spot on. So I really feel like that is John.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no doubt about it. Yeah. There you go. We'll just keep just keep believing in what's going on and that, and because like I say, you've got good insight into there. You are the chosen one, Amy.
Well, it's also emotional. I really think what he really wants me to do is to write about him, and like I have, but it's apparently I'm not done yet. So I think he really likes it when I sit down and write the book stuff, and that's that's really what I should.
Well, your books are brilliant anyway. Nothing to get hung about. Was fantastic. It was very non-linear and very unique in that sense, and entertaining. It wasn't a kind of it wasn't fan fiction, for instance, is what I'm trying to say. Someone sits down and like writes the third Beatle movie or something like that. It was its own animal, and it was really enjoyable. And anyone listening who hasn't read it, you're always yourself a treat. It is really good.
Yeah, maybe I'll record it. Speaking of that, I really do feel, looking back now, I really feel like I channeled the whole thing, and especially I've talked about the James Joyce thing. Maybe I was James Joyce, and John was Nora. Have you seen? Yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I always thought maybe James Joyce was John, but maybe I was James Joyce. I mean, I don't know, because I am I'm the writer. I'm the wordy. Whatever. I don't know.
Brilliant. No, you are the master, Jamie. That is but yeah, you could be right. There could be, I suppose, you're never going to know for sure, but you'll always be given little hints to sort of get you to the next level, won't you? Of enlightenment.
Have you watched Hard Day's Night? They just had the hi, Chloe. Thanks for being here. We're talking about a mix of political.
Hello, Chloe.
Well, okay, so the Hard Day's Night. You know the guy that played the clean. Okay, he's very clean. Paul's grandfather.
Yeah, Wilfred Bramble. He played
too. It looks like James.
Wilfred. He does, doesn't he? Yeah. Hard Day's Night's fantastic, isn't it? It's just like
Bramwell.
The birth of the modern kind of music video, isn't it? It's kind of like, it's a 90-minute music video and that. And, yeah.
Well,
have you heard sorry.
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, have you heard the other plans for the third film that permeated from time to time? At one point, they were kind of linked to doing the Three Musketeers, weren't they? Another time, they wanted to do Lord of the Rings with the Beatles in it, but Tolkien just wouldn't
What?
entertain the idea. Probably a good thing.
Well, this is probably John. I've always felt this was John saying it, not me. Um, that Yellow Submarine was the real Beatles. It got their essence. And but then Magical Mystery Tour, which was just a joke, but it turned out I love Magical Mystery Tour. That's one of my
Oh, me
favorite.
too. Yeah,
Yeah. I had
yeah.
that lady who lent me the tape. She said, good, because that was my beginning of my Beatle thing. And I worked with her at Sears. And she was like a huge music fan, and she had all the stuff of the Beatles and everything. And she said, "Oh, I have a tape of Magical Mystery Tour," and you couldn't get it anywhere. You couldn't find it anywhere, and there was no eBay back then, nothing. And so I'd been to the mall everywhere, looking for it. She's like, "Well, I've got a tape. I'll
Yeah.
let you borrow it." So, and she said, "But it's no good. It's one of their worst movies. She said it's a terrible movie." I was like, "Well, let me decide." So I go home and I'm like, "Oh, that's great. This is awesome. I love this." So I feel like
Yeah, it is. It's
they
brilliant.
fulfill.
It's kind of it's almost like a Monty Python movie. It's
Yes,
almost on that level.
yes, exactly.
It's kind of the precursor to Monty Python and that. And
Uh-huh.
yeah, I love it. I love the idea of that kind of the energy that put into the anything goes kind of atmosphere.
Right.
The idea that there's like the idea that the only rules are that there's no rules to it, and the anarchy, the way it all comes together, and that, and but particularly the scene where he's giving the spaghetti to the woman, I
Yes,
think that's just
she wrote.
that's very Python-esque.
I feel that
He's
way when
shoveling
I'm in
this.
the buffet. When I'm in the buffet at work, I have that scene in my head. Like, what did she say? I can't eat anymore. And he's just shoveling it on the table. He even almost knocks the table over, and she's like, I can't do it. I
it's
can't
just
do
it's his face though, isn't it? He's like got this kind of like demented, like and then the moustache as well with his hair slicked back.
it. See, what I
Uh,
get, he was
kind of.
making it twitchy. He was twitchy. His stepfather, sort of common
That's right.
law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's a bad story. To walking on your parents doing that, the
Oh,
story,
yeah.
Amy, don't you?
Yeah, I know the story. But he worked in a restaurant, so I think that's where John got the whole. That's where I think he based that look off of, was his Julius.
On Twitter, yeah. That's
Yeah.
interesting, yeah. And that, and yeah, I mean, uh, I like the parody of it in the Ruttles as well. In fact, I love the
Yes,
entire. I love the
I love
Ruttles,
all the trouble. Yeah.
particularly the honeymoon and the shower part. I think that's just genius. Where he meets. I can't remember the name for it now. The Nazi who's supposed to be Yoko. The girl was
Hitler's
the
daughter.
Yoko. Yeah. She was a simple German woman whose father invented World War II. Just, just a brilliant bit of exposition there.
Yeah, I love in that. You're right, the wedding scene, but also Paul's, who plays Paul. Is he Leggy? No,
Eric
that's
Idle.
right.
Eric
The way
Idle. Definitely. Yeah.
he keeps writing songs
Yeah.
in their honeymoon, and that cracks me up because I could see Paul doing that. You're on your honeymoon,
Yeah. He
you
was.
idiot.
Yeah. I like the other bit where Ron Nasty says, God, the way people talk about the Ruttles, he says, we're not bigger than Jesus, and that offends the atheists in the movie.
Bigger than God.
In the railroad, yeah, bigger than God, yeah. It was just apparently when he saw it, John had the master tape, didn't he? And he wouldn't give it back to them,
I
and
love
they were like, we need it back, John, because we've got to edit it. It's got to go on the air. He kept on to it because he loved it so much.
I love it too. I love, like, even the scene where they imitate them in Hard Day's Night going down the fire escape, and they just keep running and running
Oh
and
yeah,
running, and it's all like sped up
yeah.
like Benny Hill. That cracks me up every time I see it. That's
Oh, when
brilliant.
they get in the limousines and they have to get out one limousine into another one, and
Yeah,
it just goes. They end up back where they were in the beginning. It goes, it's brilliant, like visual gag, and then the camera moving away from Eric Idle when he's talking to it, and he has to
yeah.
chase after it. That's brilliant scene. And
Yeah.
yeah,
The reason why it works is because it's so close to it being the real thing, even musically. But there's just, and the
yeah,
Beatles are funny. They had that humor laced into everything too, but it was just a little bit. It's close, but just to the point where it's hilarious. I don't know how they did it. It's brilliant the way they did the whole thing.
A lot of people I've spoke to over the years said that when one of the things they didn't like about when John got with Yoko was that his humor seemed to that one of the things they loved of him when he was a Beatle as popularity was his sense of humor, and the fact that he was as funny, if not funnier, than a lot of comedians at the time with what he could come up with, both in interviews and in his work. And that's like one of the casualties of when he got with Yoko. He seemed to become a lot more subdued. Maybe it was because of, he was on heroin or whatever it was, but he did kind of sort of like change as a person. I don't know. Maybe he matured. Maybe it got to the point where he was growing up. But
I think that's part of it. But she definitely had a certain effect on him. There's no doubt about it. But I also think that it had, because this is what I just saw from him, was that they weren't allowed to talk about things like the war and political things. And Brian had died, and then he got with Yoko pretty soon after that. So it wasn't just that he had changed. All of a sudden, he could talk about a lot of things that were political, and he'd always talked about in behind the scenes in the Beatles. So before that, all he had was his, just being funny and saying stupid things. It was never stupid because he was incredibly smart, but he wasn't allowed to talk about political things. So his real self was kind of like it still is, very political and could be quite serious, to be honest. But he just couldn't let that out. He wasn't allowed to do it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, to go from the fallout of Bigger Than Jesus statement within 2.5 years to put out a record where he's saying the way things are going, they're going to crucify me. I mean, that is quite a transformation to have gone from. It's interesting in Cynthia Lennon's book when she's talking about when they went away to do the tour after he'd said though, the comments, or he was misquoted. But the Bigger Than Jesus controversy because of all the death threats they've been getting. It's interesting in Cynthia's book when she said that day when he left, like they hugged each other for about 25 minutes before he left, before he got in the car, because they literally thought that might be the last time they saw one another, because he was scared of what could happen over there in America, and maybe his intuition was right, but it was just off by like 15 years or whatever it was.
Yeah, they had death threats. And I write about that in the book where he and Cynthia have a conversation, and Brian Epstein was on TV defending him and saying, "Oh, John always says things like this. I don't know why you guys are so worried about it. It's just, I don't know." But Cynthia, he tells her, "Yeah, there's been death threats," and she's like, "Well, you can't go because you have me and you have a child." And he says, "We have to go because America is paying our bills. Basically, if we don't go to America, we lose a ton of money. The band would fall apart. Everything would fall apart. Because the Beatles weren't just four guys. It was a publishing company. It was the whole recording. It was contracts. It was Pete Mal Evans. It was engineers. It was secretaries. George Martin. It was a whole conglomerate. So to not go to America would have been, he felt like it would have ruined the Beatles. So. But he was scared. They were both scared of him. And there were things that happened, like people throwing firecrackers on stage, which was, terrifying.
Yeah. And there being one police guard while they were on stage, and who said to Ringo, "Don't worry, I'm here." Yeah, and Ringo said to him, "What are you going to do, catch the bullet?" Or, interesting, something that you just brought up there was you're talking about when he made the Jesus comments and Brian came out and did the apology, and then they had the staged apology. And I remember Cynthia in the book, she said John wasn't one to apologize for something if he felt he was right in what he was saying. And his meaning was misconstrued. But is an interest, you probably know this, Amy, but when he got drunk at Paul's 21st party and he had the fight with Bob Wooler, the DJ, you know the story, and then Brian Epstein put out a statement saying, I'm really sorry. I can't believe I did it to such a good friend. Well, John wouldn't apologize in real life. That was all Brian Epstein's doing to save face in the media. However, there's something that's not spoken about often in fact, practically at all. Bob Wooler himself was a closet homosexual. And on that night, I've heard this a couple of times. There's a comedian called Jimmy Tarbuck. I don't know whether you're familiar with him. He's a Liverpool-based comedian who went to school with John, and then he became like a sort of Johnny Carson over there. He had a talk show, and he was at the party, and he insists Bob Wooler actually propositioned John. John had come back from the holiday with Brian Epstein, and Bob Wooler had been ribbing him, saying, "So you went away with Brian and all this and that," and he was asking about, and he actually propositioned John to the point where he may have put his hands on John, and that was the point where John snapped, because homosexuality was still illegal in Britain at the time, and it wasn't very good for the street cred. You put that with he'd been drinking, and it was the perfect storm. What happened.
It could have contributed if I can see that maybe he put his hand on John's knee at some point and said something. But I think most of John's reaction was he was afraid that this would get out in the news and it would destroy everything. It would, because they had all these teenage girls that loved them. Their fame was at its height at that point.
Oh, yeah. Well, it would have been scandalous if,
yeah.
If anyone
illegal,
and there probably would have been journalists who would have used that as a weapon against them on some point, because to get column inches and headline inches, and to add a bit of shade to the Beatles, because everything was going so well for the Beatles, and there would have been journalists who wanted to kind of upset the party, so to speak. And so he was right. He was probably fearful of anything like that coming out,
But John, this is what John shows me. That was a big moment in his life where he changed because he saw that he was a monster, and that was the worst that he could possibly be in that moment. That was his worst self, and he faced it. And the next day he said, "What's worse, the world knowing that I might have some gay tendencies, or being a complete total monster and almost killing somebody?" And you notice that after that, John did show more of the things like you've got to hide your love away and things like that, where he would allow a little bit more of that out of himself and show the world that he wasn't just some straight guy, because I don't think he was. I don't think he was completely straight. Do you
think he experimented, or was it just
I think
emotionally was?
I don't think they knowingly did it, but I think in Hamburg there were experiences that maybe they didn't always know at the time, but there definitely were guys in drag, and so nobody's really talking about that. That's what John has showed me. And also, there's a picture of Stu Sutcliffe that's not widely known, but it's where Stu's wearing like a see-through lacy blouse, like a woman's blouse, and it's almost like he and Astrid are very sort of bisexual together. And that's Hamburg was like that. Hamburg was a very, I don't know, everybody was free flowing, and John was part of that, and that's part of why they grew their hair out. It was that whole effeminate letting loose of the toxic male. Whatever you want to call it. I don't know.
Kind of androgynous, wasn't it? It was kind of androgyny, kind of.
Yeah, androgyny. There you go. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, well, Stu was very beautiful, wasn't he? He was very kind of delicately featured and that. And funny enough, a couple of nights ago, I actually walked past his grave. It was I didn't realise where I was until I walked past it. That sounds so very kind of matter of fact, but it happens when you're in Liverpool. That happens, There's literally tourists everywhere at different destinations and stuff, and you just become so blasé about it because you're used to kind of seeing them there. But I can see people coming to the city being excited by like all the hallmarks and whatnot.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that would be for me. Here's what I want to see. I want to see Liverpool for sure, but for some reason, one of the biggest things I want to see is and it's just a tree stump now in the Knowles Park or Strawberry where Strawberry Fields was filmed in Penny Lane.
Yeah.
That's like my biggest thing that I want to see. I don't know why, but that's really like my dream is to see that and to go to that.
Oh, well, we'll have to make it a reality, Amy. I can show you around. My cousin actually runs my cousin actually runs the Magical Mystery Tour. The tours themselves. He's got two. Well, you've probably seen. He's got the two buses that takes them to all the different locations and that. And like I say, I must have done that about 50 times. So it's kind of, you see, it becomes matter of a fact. Oh yeah, I've been there. I look out my window now, I can see the cavern. And it was sort of like spraying my neck a bit. I can see other things like in the other direction and that. So you kind of, to be at the heart of it, it becomes kind of like I say, to walk past Stuart Sutcliffe's grave and not realise where you were, that's kind of that is kind of like a big one, you know. And that, but yeah, I think it is a really nice gesture that they did put Stu on the cover of Sergeant Pepper. You know, I think
Yeah.
that's like it's a beautiful way of kind of commemorating him, isn't it? You know, without
Yeah.
actually doing it. Yeah.
Well, that's one thing in the
Have you
book
ever
too.
spoken to Stu? Sorry, Amy.
Um,
Have you ever communicated with Stu or?
well, not really. No, no, not really. And the same thing with Aunt Mimi. I don't really connect with Aunt Mimi either. It's weird. I think they probably have very protective, or maybe it's because I don't need to. I don't know. I don't feel like I feel like in the book I did channel Stu a lot, and that was the thing about it was I didn't realize how much Stuart um, came to John after he died and was part of John's evolution into the more philosophical, gentler, peaceful
Yeah.
person. And he kept John real. So there's some of the points where John is really um, not being his real self, and Stu would show up in a mirror or something and say, "What are you doing? Don't you remember who you
Interesting.
are?" And he would remind them of things like, and remember I told you I didn't know that John was into Man Ray, and he and Stuart would talk about Dadaism and Man Ray and everything. And that
Yeah.
came out, and Stuart would come around, and he was the one that would say, "Don't you remember nothing's real?"
Yeah.
I really feel like Stuart did hang around John a lot in John's life to help him from becoming a sellout and not the person he wanted to be. Helped him develop.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. He kept them to his essence, basically, of who John really was in that sense, and
Mhm.
that, and yeah, that's fantastic, isn't it? Yeah. I've often I'm out curious about the relationship between Stu and Paul. You know, had Stuart lived, would John and Paul have been as prolific as a team? Or would that influence have like been there at some point? You know, and
Yeah. The problem with Stu was that he really was not a good musician. He looked good, but he was not a good, and he was killing the band in a way. And although he
yeah,
really helped the band because he helped them with their look, that was his real thing, was as an artist, as a visionary, he helped the band with their look. But Paul saw it as they
yeah,
were getting all this momentum, but Stu was dragging them down like an anchor. And so he wasn't mad at Stu so much as a human being, but just as a figure in the band, he was really preventing them from having the success that they needed. But he did help
yeah,
them get to Hamburg because he had, his bass guitar. So the reason why Paul would be mad at Stu is because he felt like there was just dissension in the group, and he was, yeah, and he was
there's
drawing
there's
away
probably a
from.
bit of jealousy there. There's probably a bit of jealousy there, I think, as well, wasn't there? Paul wanting John's full attention. You know what it's like when you're at that age, kind of. You want people's full attention, don't you, and whatnot. Do you think Harry and John were lovers? I know Harry and Ringo always had their arms around each other. Um,
I don't think so. I honestly
I
don't
don't think
think.
so.
Yeah, I think that it
Brothers,
could.
brothers is what I think. I
Yeah.
think probably as close as you could be in that sense. I think they were kind of. I think there was a bit of as well with John and Harry. There was a kind of brotherly competition there as well. I think you know
Mhm.
they both admired each other a great deal, and that. I don't know, Amy. Maybe you've got more insight onto that.
Yeah, my first instant thought was no, and it's not because um, they couldn't have. I mean, they could have, but I really feel like John mostly was sexually attracted to women, and even though he did have tendencies, he really that was his main thing. So um, I
Yeah,
don't get it at all. But that doesn't mean he didn't cross his mind, and he could have. He did
yeah,
love him. He loved him in the way that the other way, which really is without sex. Then you could have divine love, the highest form of love. So he did love Harry, but it's
yeah,
just it was like more like brothers. It really was. He really looked
yeah.
out for him.
That's how it seems to me,
Admired.
And I love the way Harry devoted a lot of his life after John's death to gun control.
Yeah,
And being the sort of the kind of because he had death threats himself from getting involved with that. He was and he was told it was a dangerous proposition to do that. and it was also kind of it wasn't helping his street cred either at that point. Although you think you would get kind of credibility to being anti-gun, but there were people who were seeing it kind of, you saw the sort of the macho image of the gun, who felt that it was no business of Harry to get involved with criticising that. But he'd lost one of his best friends to gun violence, and he wanted to do something about it. And I think you can tell that John's death, even though they hadn't seen each other for a few years prior to it happening, you can tell it did affect him in a terrible way, because I think Harry had always been optimistic that they were going to it was going to heat up again further down the line. I think that what I get from it, Amy, I don't know about you, is I think John felt like he'd got his life in order, and he wanted the same for Harry. That's the feeling I get, and he wanted in future, if the relationship was to resume, friendship rather to resume, he wanted it to be on those terms rather than what had gone on during the last weekend. That's the way I feel.
And also, John showed me that John was very strong alpha male at the end of the day, and just that alone. And Harry was more, even though overtly he was sort of, he could act very wild, but Harry at the end of the day was more gentle and, what would you say, willing to, like the softer, what would you say? What's the word? You're a writer. Think of a word. Amicable, or just yielding.
Yeah, amicable.
And John was more alpha male, so he didn't have patience for that type of relationship, and he just couldn't have been in that position where he was Harry's lover. So it just, but they would hug, and things like that. They're very affectionate.
Now, if the question is, did they love each other? Oh yes, there's no doubt about that. They loved one another, but I don't think it was explored in a sexual. I think it was brotherly love. That is the best kind of. Although, Carolyn, it could be wrong. Maybe you know something we don't know.
But yeah, definitely. And there's always room to be wrong. And but I do think that John and Brian did have a few times together, because John really admired Brian. He liked his power as the manager. He saw that Brian had a lot of influence and tenacity, and kind of like a stupid computer. But my virus is popping up. And will you buy this? I don't even have
Harry. That's Harry. That's Harry. Yeah.
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 But
I know. I think Elton John was deeply in love with John. In fact,
think so too. Yeah.
But what's the song? What have I got to do to make you love me? Is actually, you know that story, Amy, that he told, Bernie Taupin. He told him his feelings about John and the fact that what he was doing, and Bernie came up with those lyrics that he put music to. So what have I got to do to make you love me? Basically, he was going out of his way to attract John's attention. Maybe John was aware of it, I'm not sure, and was flattered by it. Maybe, I don't know. And but that's as far as it went. But I do think Elton was in love with John.
Definitely. Yeah, I think so too. And I think John loved that. He loved that people loved him like that. I think so that's where he was mostly gay, was that, oh, this guy loves me. Okay, that's great. I love it. He still sexually was, wanted to be with a woman for the most part, but he did love the fact that if somebody loved him, he was like, that's great. I love that. I'm very flattered by that. So, yeah.
I like the story Freddie Mercury told about John Lennon, that when Queen went to America the first time, they supported Mott the Hoople, and sorry, I'll come back to this in a second. Sorry, you gave house. Oh, that's nice. Ringo is a decent person. I think he is a good friend to have. Ringo, I think. Ringo, do you know the Liverpool controversy with Ringo, Amy? Do you know this? Well, he said some unsavoury things about Liverpool, and he's kind of, for a while he was kind of person non grata in Liverpool, because what he said wasn't. He didn't say the wisest of things, shall we say? Basically, Liverpool won European Capital of Culture for 2008, and there was a massive concert at the end of it all. At the end of it, to sort of to hand over the to the next city, and Paul McCartney was the headliner, and Paul agreed to do it for free, but Ringo took 2 million from the city, and it was seen as a bad thing. Yet Ringo was his best man. The only reason I'm saying that is that that's the only place where I've ever seen Ringo criticised is for that kind of behaviour. But to people in the industry who knew him and were close to Ringo, everyone says he was a brilliant person. He's a lovely man, and he was a good friend to have. And yet he was. In fact, he made that movie together, didn't he? The Son of Dracula. And Ringo was in that. I think Harry played someone called, I think it was Count Me Out. No, Count Dracula. He was Count Me Out, and Ringo played Merlin, I think, in it. And it was an Apple. It was an Apple-funded film. I've never seen it, but apparently, well, it doesn't sound like Citizen Kane for a start, does it? It sounds like two drunken friends who've got the budget to make a film, and they went and made it. Yeah. Have you seen that, Carolyn? If you listen, have you seen that Son of Dracula that Harry was in? He also did the soundtrack too. It'd be good to get some feedback on that.
I've seen Caveman.
You've seen it, Amy?
No, I don't think I have. Yeah. But I've seen Caveman, which is kind of, it's not the best film, but I like it because it is, I think it's a cute film.
Yeah, I like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like what it is. It's harmless, isn't it? It's they weren't trying to reinvent the comedy wheel by doing it. They were just trying to make like a given version of Flintstones.
Yeah, it's if you've ever watched any old sci-fi movies from the 50s, it could equate to that type of quality. I mean, I don't see it being any worse than that. And it's cute. I think it's a cute movie. I don't know. I like it.
Yeah, and it was important in his in his life, wasn't it? Because he met Barbara Bach on it.
Yeah, that's right.
I've seen it, and they were so stunned. There you go. Yeah.
Well,
yeah, I like Ringo.
I'm getting hungry here. I'm gonna have to get off soon. But let me say this: I'll have to watch it sometime. Paul. Okay, here's something. Speaking of that, every picture where like Ringo gets married to Maureen, right? And then doesn't he get married later to Barbara Bach? Isn't Paul like drunk and trying to kiss all the wives? Have you ever seen those pictures where Paul like, oh my God, you don't invite him to your party?
Yeah.
That really cracks me up when I
What happened to that story about Paul at George Harrison's wedding was funny, wasn't it?
Patty Boyd's sister.
Yeah, do you know the story that Patty Boyd's brothers? Oh, sorry, it was a joke, but everyone wants a masterpiece. Well,
I think that's for Caveman. Yeah, I agree with that, Carolyn.
Yeah, it's a good point. Well, I was just saying at George's wedding to Patty, her brothers were like kind of isolated on the day and a bit down. So Paul decided to show them how to fire arrows with a bow and arrow, and he smashed George's window of his new Rolls Royce. And and then there was an argument because he wouldn't replace it. Well, that's it. But that, like we were talking before about when Stuart Sutcliffe died, he was kind of hapless in what he said to Sutcliffe's mum, wasn't it, Paul? Paul said, he said, don't worry, when my mum died, it took me about 10 weeks and then I was fine. He said, you'll be fine in about 10 weeks.
Yeah.
He meant well, but it was, oh, for Christ's sake, Paul,
Probably learn now.
Can we talk a bit about Jolson? Can we talk a bit about Jolson for a second, Amy?
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
Okay, I know it's a bit of a controversial subject. He comes back into my life a bit. It was the reason I became a performer in the beginning was because of Al Jolson. I told you before. I saw the Jolson story when I was 6, and my granddad was a performer. My granddad was a comedian, and he used to play the piano. He used to do the working men's club scene in the north of England in the 70s and the 80s. And he retired for it through ill health. And then when I was 8, I started going around the nightclub scene with him when I was 8, doing the act that we had, which was based on Al Jolson. He would play the piano and I would sing Al Jolson songs. So I know it's a kind of obscure and it's a strange one, but I genuinely do feel towards Jolson the way people feel about the Beatles or Elvis or whatever it is. I do get kind of excited by Jolson as a performer, and that when I hear his voice, it really does. I know it sounds corny to say, but it does feel like he's singing to me, and that and I think it's unfortunate that like kind of the blackface thing has made him kind of like kind of a dangerous proposition, if you know what I mean. It's like a lot of he's kind of being buried in history when really I think he should be focused on a lot more and for a lot more things than just doing blackface. How do you
Yeah,
feel about Jolson? Did you repulsed by him more?
no, because I've always told you that that was at the time he thought he was doing something that was a not, I don't want to say honorable, but a great tribute. And he was trying to join them because at the time there was such a separation, and that the blackface was a way to almost become part of that culture. Yes, now it's culturally inappropriate to do that. It's called, what did they call it? Cultural appropriation. Um, and so
Yeah.
but he thought he was doing a nice thing. He wanted to be in that jazz world and be
He
with
was
them.
he was far from white. That's right himself. He was a Russian Lithuanian Jew. It's the strange thing in doing the research because I've got this. We've been talking about this project that I've got in mind to do about Jolson. So I went back and I read a lot of biographies and I found out he spent time in Liverpool, which was
Oh,
I've never heard before. When he didn't go directly from Russia to America. He came to England first and he settled in Liverpool for a while. And he was tutored here with an English tutor. So by the time he went to America, he could speak English. That was really strange when I heard that. That was, strange how like Liverpool crops up in places like that. So we'll go back to answering these questions. What do you think John's thoughts would have been had he met or known Madonna? She's next only to the Beatles and Billboard's top 100 artists of all time. I'll
he
let you
knew.
answer that first, Amy.
Oh, well, he knew about her because she was really up and coming before he died. So he was more into, at that point, the Cars and Blondie and the B-52s. And of course, he loved old time, he still loved rock and roll and old time music. And but he knew about her. I think he would have thought that she was very, oh, she sang Imagine. Well, that's cool. No, I think that he thought that she was. You know how it is. It's like hearing about somebody who's up and coming now, and you go, "Oh, that's great." It's not quite in my genre or my era, but that's great. Good for her. Not really his type of music. So no disrespect at all, but it's just that type of thing. Because John was really connecting still with his. He even said it himself. Oh, we're 40 now because at the time he was 40. Yeah, he died in 1980. And so he had he really was still in the era of his 30s because he had just turned 40. And so I think that he just thought, oh, yeah, she's just part of that culture of New York, the dance scene, which he really wasn't part of. He wasn't part of that at all. So no disrespect, but it wasn't, he was more into Blondie because the music, he liked the music of Blondie and the Cars, the B-52s are
Yes.
really, yeah. If anything, it
Yeah.
was more
So how about you? How about you, Amy? Where did you in the 80s in America? Were you a fan of Madonna, or was she just not your kind of thing? Or
She was always on the radio growing up. She was always on the radio, and sometimes I'd be like, "Damn, there's she's taken over the radio again." And here's the thing: like during the school year, everybody would listen to whatever was popular. So Madonna was popular, and certain, even Debbie Gibson, whatever the hell. And then in the summer, when school was out, I noticed that my music style would be more what I actually liked. And I would listen to the Moody Blues. My brother would come home from college and he'd have these mixtapes of the Moody Blues and Police. And do you know the band The Fix? Have you ever heard of The Fix?
yeah.
And Marshall Crenshaw
Really?
and Warren Zevon. And so I've actually got a really good, and yeah, so a lot of that brought out who I really was, what I really liked. So Madonna was on the radio and I admired her. Maybe this is how John felt, but it wasn't really my thing. Now, when she came out with Vogue, I remember thinking, well, that's cool. There's a lot of artistry in the 1930s and old movies and stuff like that. So I actually really liked it. But I've never been a huge
Yeah.
fan of Madonna. I'm not a huge fan, but I do respect her.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
it's interesting, isn't it? It's interesting that you brought up Blondie and that because I think that kind of period where Debbie Harry dropped out of the industry to look after her husband uh, was when Madonna kind of rose to her ascendancy, and it's there's people who think she ripped Blondie off, isn't it? They just took like Debbie Harry and Blondie thing and just took it to the next level, made it more provocative and kind of more fierce and such.
I love Deborah Harry as like I love Blondie, but I also love her as a woman because I feel like she really knows who she is. And what's funny about her is they got famous when she was in her mid to late 30s. So there she
Yeah,
is in a high school career, and everyone's she's so beautiful, um, and she still is extremely beautiful. But it was at a point when she was just about to get more out of the age of being a rock star. So her fame hit right before that. And then what is she? She was in Hairspray. Like you said, she sort of dropped out. And when she came back only a few years later, she was kind of different. And um, she'd had her first child,
yeah,
right? And did
kind of.
so,
I think
yeah.
so. Yeah, and that, and yeah, and yeah, but yeah, they met. John and Yoko met Blondie and Chris Stein, didn't they? Blondie, Debbie Harry and Chris Stein. I think they met at
Oh,
the
goodness.
Dakota a couple of weeks before he died. So humid. Some girls across the street got well.
Oh my
All right,
goodness.
though. That's the rain. That's what I was speaking about.
It's hot. It's not
Yeah.
humid down here in the Midwest. It's like really, really hot. We are in the almost the hundreds right now. So nobody's going outside pretty much. It says feels like 106. So up in Canada, I guess you guys have the rain and humidity. Not fun. That is no fun to have that humidity at all. Okay, Paul didn't think much of Madonna at first when Justify My Love came out and called it for. See, the thing about Paul is he's very amicable, where he'll work with a lot of people, and I can see how he and Madonna wouldn't get along exactly, but he's willing to work with people. So that's good.
Yeah.
He can do that. Like he worked with even Kanye, and he's worked with Taylor Swift, and who hasn't Paul worked with? To be honest, he's worked with everybody. But that's great.
What do you think of his collaborations with Michael Jackson? Are you a fan of Say and The Man and
I am.
The Girl's Mind?
They're
Yeah.
friends now. Okay, it's good that they're friends now. And by the way, Fatima, yeah, that's humidity sounds terrible. I couldn't. It sounds like you're in Florida. But yeah, I love all that stuff with Paul. And you looking back, I mean, with Michael Jackson and Paul, like say the video, it's very clever. And then Linda's even in that video.
Yeah, and
But
Latoya's in it as well.
oh yeah, so Paul's very clever and able to do things like that, which John wouldn't. John wouldn't have done that because John was too much in his
Yeah,
own head, his own artistic sense that there's no
yeah.
way he would have done that. But John liked to
He's
align with
less
people
show
like
busy. Yeah.
my friend. Paul was right to feel betrayed by Michael. Yeah, exactly. By the way, I'm going to give the 10-minute mark because I'm starved. I haven't had lunch, which is okay, but now I'm like super hungry. Um,
Sorry, Amy. Yeah, if you're hungry when you need to go, just
for 10
been
more
good.
minutes.
No, I was just saying about it, Amy. We talked about Al Jolson earlier and that, and the connection with Larry Parks, who is from your neck of the woods. Well,
Hmm.
he's from Lawrence, Kansas. Larry
Yeah.
Parks. Did you look into him at all when I asked?
Sounds familiar. That's right. Let me look at it right now. The name Larry
Larry
Parks.
Parks. He was one of the Hollywood 10. I can tell you that now. So he'd been a member of the Communist Party, and the
Oh,
Jolsons. He
that's
played
right.
Al Jolson in. Played
Oh
Al
yeah.
Jolson in the Jolson story. He was Oscar nominated. He became the biggest box office star in the world, and the U.S. government made an example of him because they needed a big name to pin the Red Scare, the communist, the House of Un-American Activity on. So they chose Larry Parks, and his career was destroyed by it.
Um,
Oh, sorry.
okay. Well, let me say this. I know one time I tried out for a play at a local theater here, and it was who's the actress? You know the movie Wings, Buddy. Who's the girl that was in the silent movies? Mary Pickford. She was married in.
Yeah,
I'm in Olathe. And then Lawrence, Kansas is just down the road. So we actually have a lot of history, and Buster Keaton came through the Midwest.
yeah,
So a lot of the
yeah.
silent movie people that are from this area. It's
That they
kind of
came
interesting.
through. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. brilliant.
So we do have that legacy around here of that. So I'm not
Yeah,
surprised. It
and of
is
course,
surprising, but
Frank Baum, of course, was fascinated with Kansas because he's at the human half of Oz in Kansas. Was he from Kansas, Frank Baum, or did he
no,
just
I don't
use
think so.
that like right?
No,
So that's a kind of nice tribute, I suppose. I suppose he wanted the kind of like kind of like a farm state, didn't he? That kind of thing.
yeah.
And
And so
so
Carol,
Carolyn was in the same room as Harry years before met him at a
wow,
boxing match. Oh right, okay. So what
okay.
boxing match was that, Carolyn? If you can remember.
Yeah, that's exciting.
Yeah.
Um, I remember when I was a kid, boxing would be on TV more, and it like now it's pay-per-view, but it was more sort of normalized, and I just can't believe that I sat and watched a boxing match with all the bloody.
You know,
But
I,
Rocky was popular.
I've been a fan of boxing, and in my youth I did used to box. That's why my nose is the way it is. And I just look at it now and I think it's just so ridiculous. It's
Yeah,
people punching each other for millions. It's like for
yeah,
entertainment. It's
exactly.
like opium for the masses, of course. Because and that like the grand illusion that you're not seeing what's in front of you. But when it comes down to it, it's just commercial violence. And that and I don't. Do you think the day will come when it's illegal, Amy? When it's banned, or do you think there's too much money to be made from it?
Yeah, I don't think it'll ever be illegal. I mean, football is just as bad, to be honest. Football is really bad.
Well, yeah. You've got
But
contact and
but they make it pay per view, so it's not normalized anymore, which I think is good. Okay, and Carl
yeah.
says, it's 4:25. Haven't slept yet. That's
Oh goodness.
pretty early. And then it was an
It was
alley
Ali
match,
match.
side room with
Sadri McKing,
interesting.
right? Oh, that's
Well, I
it.
know the Beatles met him in Florida.
Yeah, they
Was it
did.
Florida? It was
Yeah.
down in Florida.
Well, he's one of the few people who was left. One of the few people who left Muhammad Ali speechless was John Lennon, wasn't it? You know the story.
No, what's
Um, he said something to him like, normally someone would say something to Muhammad Ali and he'd say, "Well, you're not as dumb as you look," and the audience would crack up laughing, and that'd be the end of it. But he said this to John Lennon, "You're not as dumb as you look," and John Lennon said to Muhammad Ali, "Well, listen, no one could be as dumb as you look," and
oh,
he won up them like that. Oh, this was in Las Vegas.
okay. That makes sense. That
He
makes
said
sense.
that. So he said to Muhammad Ali basically, "Well, no one could be as dumb as you look." And the room cracked up, and Muhammad Ali cracked up with him because no one had answered him and had like the courage to kind of answer him back. And that's
And
it.
see, in this climate, people would say, "Oh, that's racist," but they weren't racist. In fact, the Beatles made sure that there was no segregation in their concerts. Um,
Yeah,
and yeah, so John, see, that's the thing. John saw everyone on his level, and that's cool
yeah.
about them. I love those shots where he's pretending to hit one Beatle, and they're all like,
Yet the
I love,
heads are like, yeah, yeah.
yeah, that's
It's
great.
yeah. But yeah, you're talking about just to finish up on the Jolson thing, and I won't mention it again then, Amy. It was the interesting thing about the blackface. Now, when he gave up using the blackface, he got hate mail from black people who,
Yeah,
who were saying, "You're not representing us."
yeah,
Um, and the blackface only came about because, as a very obvious Russian Lithuanian Jew, he was failing auditions. He wasn't being allowed on stage. The only way he could do it was to disguise his features and join the minstrel troupe, which he did, and then it became a trademark with him then. But I just bring it up when I can. It was never from a point of view. He was never doing it to belittle anyone or to cause offence. It was in celebration of it, as bizarre as that might sound.
that's what I've always felt. And it was a different
Yeah,
era. Yeah, I can totally see, but it also kind of put us, it really made him a target for that separation, that hatred of people saying, "How dare he do that?" But at the time, it was innocent. He really didn't mean to project that. He
yeah,
wanted to be part of their world and honor them, as you said. It was more of a celebration. So, um,
yeah.
if anything, oh, are you still there?
Understand?
You just went sideways. You went sideways. Maybe that's
Hello.
Al. Maybe Al did that. Yes, I think Joel. Yes, he was. And so Jamie, as he portrays him, it'll be more about how much pain that caused to be, sort of ostracized again with something that he was doing with a lot of respect. Because he was very talented. Okay, yeah, Jamie's gone. I'll take. How about this? If you leave, and why don't you leave and come back, Jamie? I'll take you off, and you come back. Hopefully, he can. I want. Can you leave, Jamie? Can you leave and come back? I don't want to like. It says kick from studio. Okay, I'm going to kick him off and have him come back. Come back, Jamie. Come back. So it's 3:32 here, Central Time. And yeah, I need to eat lunch and I need to feed puppy dog here in a second. Jamie, come back. Do you know that song? Any kind of fool could see. Come back, come back. Well, anyway, so uh, this whole JD Vance thing. Uh, what a crazy world we live in. But Spirit did tell me that 45 was going to pick JD Vance. And um, it's sad. He that's probably like the most awful, monstrous person but he picked somebody that was just as bad as him. Okay, if they hated him so much, why would they make the first talkie with him? That's true. I think that here's what I see about Al Jolson. I see that there was an era of jazz, and it's 4:32 here. Okay, so you're an hour of difference. Um, it was part of the jazz movement of the time, the artistry, and it's sort of like mixed in with the whole Art Deco jazz scene. So it was part of art. Now it's banned and it's not looked upon very well. But at the time, it was art. It was pure art. It was part of jazz. So, but I think once that ended and we went more into um, sort of like we saw how racist we were. See, that's always the problem when you find out how racist society is. It ruins anything that was done lovingly. It puts a stain on it and ruins it. So yeah, that's why Jolson. But I think that overall, I think most people see Al Jolson as an artist, and that he was very talented and he was part of that era. So that's what I see. I don't see like a big what would you call it? My brain is not working today. I think it's when I go live and also I'm hungry and my brain's not working. Yeah. Well, anyway. And Jamie's not back. Where did Jamie go? He's gone. Anyway, you guys have any questions about anything? Come back, Jamie. I do have to go though in about 5 minutes. So yeah, it's hot here. Um, I'm sick of the news. I can't watch the news. Probably like you guys. I can't watch it. I see these news breaks, like the whole VP thing that just happened, and but I can't watch the news because if we had reporters that we thought were honest and had integrity, we could watch the news, but we can't. Like I literally can't watch any of it. So, how are you guys feeling about JD Vance and 45 and everything that's happened? Sort of shocking. Let me check my email real quick. I could send him the link again. Maybe I'll do that. Let's see. Yeah, send him the link again. So. This whole thing with 45 picking JD Vance is really dumb because it's really sealed the deal that he is part of the project. You know what? I'll just say 25. And he's full on. And it is his Mein Kampf. And he's been saying it out loud at all his rallies, everything that's in there. And I said, it sounds like a manifesto. It sounds like a madman's manifesto. Um, and the other day he tried to distance himself from it. Well, if he was really trying to distance himself, he wouldn't pick JD Vance. So it's clear that it's full on. And this, to me, I know some people would say, "Oh, he's going to get elected, and it's just going to be awful." And the thing is, I think this really killed his chance of being elected. To be honest, um, it's the worst. It's like the worst thing he could have ever done. But it does show so much of his, again, his madman. 45's brain is madman right now because a clear-headed person would not be doing this. Um, and look what happened on Saturday. No matter what happened, no matter why Saturday happened at the rally, um, that is it's the energy of that. There's a lot of boomerang energy coming back to 45 for things like this, for his bad actions. And I don't know if you saw this, but this morning there was a picture of lightning hitting Trump Tower. And so it's almost like the universe is coming after him. It's not just humans that are coming after him for things like this, it's the universe. So um, I don't condone violence in any way, but 45 is sort of um, plotting things that are not good for him and causing, it's like putting down a firecracker and then throwing matches at it and just like waiting for an explosion. Well, Jamie's not coming back, so I think I'm going to end this. Does anybody have any comments or anything you want to say about the world right now? And then I'm going to go feed Puppy and me because I'm starved. I'm in that hunger mode where I can feel like where it's starting to like literally eating up stored fat in my body. It's like, oh, I need some food. So it's whatever. It's a weird thing. I love you guys. Thanks for being here. Yeah, this is supposed to be all pure Beatles, but as usual, it goes off track. But that's okay. I'm happy to talk about everything. That's good. And I think I'm gonna do something. I wrote a book with my one of my pen names, but it's a book that I feel is very important, and it's called The Moonflowers, and it's about a woman who breaks up. She has a fight with her husband, who is very sort of abusive. I love you too, Carolyn. Love you. No, thanks for being here. But I think I'm going to do a reading, either on this channel or my music, my main channel, but which has hardly any views. But I want to do a reading of that book because I think it's the political climate of women's rights being erased right now. And what happens in that book is, when I wrote that, I remember talking about, oh, I need an agent for this book, which I never got, and I never got published by. I had to publish it myself. And I remember people told me, oh, Pete, no one cares about that. No one cares about women's rights because everything's all okay now for women. And I was like, really? They are? They are? Everything's perfect for women right now? It's set in the 70s amid the bicentennial, the 4th of July. And Jane Day kicks out her husband, he rapes her basically, marital rape. And then it's about that summer where she finds herself, and her son too, he finds himself. They sort of parallel each other, and it's that very 1970s that I love, that retro 70s, the bicentennial. Um, and it's really a book about the summer where a woman finds herself after finally getting out of an abusive relationship. And I think that a lot of people, I read it recently, and I don't always read my own work, but reading through it, I thought, this is an important story, her viewpoint, and people need to hear this. So I have this plan. One day, I was going to do it on the 4th of July, but stuff kept happening, and then I had to dig a trench because of the flood and everything. But I want to do like a live event where I read that entire book, and it may take me an entire day. So I want to do that. Oh, puppy dog is snoring. So I need to go. I love you guys. Thanks for being here, and I will come back sometime. Hang in there. The world's going to be okay. President Biden is very strong and very protected by the angels. I've always seen that. He has a lot of light, and they didn't get him. They tried to get him here, as you know. They tried to get President Biden on they tried to take his voice away, his power, his legacy, and they tried to make us do it through the inside. They tried to make us dissent, but it didn't work. And we are with him, and he's strong, and the angels, the divine, are with President Biden, and we're going to be okay. We just have to hang in there. But it was an attack from within. So keep the faith. We're going to be fine. And I love you, and I'll be back. Thanks for being here. Bye, you guys.